Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. A polarizing midterm campaign is now in its final week. Joining us on the phone with some insights on election trends and key races is John Zogby, President and CEO of Zogby International, consistently recognized as one of the most accurate political pollsters. He is also the author of The Way We'll Be, the Zogby Report on the Transformation of the American Dream. Welcome back to Newsmax TV, John.
Always good to talk to you, Kathleen.
John, just moments ago we received new results from Zogby Interactive which show the GOP has hit 50% in the congressional generic ballot for an 8-point lead, with Democrats facing what one publication calls a record-setting enthusiasm gap. Have Republicans closed the deal on the House?
Close the deal, there's still almost a week to go, so we can't predict that. But let's say we've known for a while that Republicans will do very well next week. I'm a latecomer to this, but it looks to me as if, as I look race by race, that Republicans will probably gain a majority of seats in the House. I'm not ready to give it a number, though, because too many of these seats are too close to call, and too many voters undecided really don't like either party.
Now, your poll also found President Obama's approval rating has slipped to 43%. Is the midterm election purely a rejection of Obama and his policies, or should we be giving more credit to the Tea Party and the GOP?
Oh, it's a bunch of things, but sure. I mean, on November 3rd, we will definitely see that this was in one way or another a referendum on the president. These midterm elections normally are. Number two, there is credit to the Tea Party in the sense that they've generated and given shape to a lot of the anger that's out there, especially, obviously, in terms of opposition to Obama, opposition to spending, opposition to government. And then I think, thirdly, in the final analysis, it's the economy and a very foul mood.
All right, let's talk about the Senate, because there's a growing consensus that a Republican-controlled Senate is not out of the question. Do you agree? And what do you think would tip the balance in key races?
A Republican Senate is not out of the question, but I do think that it's quite unlikely. Note that I didn't say highly unlikely, but quite unlikely. There's a lot of close races. But essentially, I think if the election becomes a wave on Election Day, and frankly, Kathleen, historically, we don't know when those waves hit until the Election Day itself, because as many as 10% of voters tell us they make up their minds on Election Day. But if it becomes a wave of rejection, a tsunami, in fact, of rejection, then that's the case where Republicans, pick up some of the additional seats, some of the ones that we're going to talk about that are awfully close right now.
Now, there are at least 6 Senate races right now that are very, very close, so we want to get your thoughts on them. Lightning round, if you will.
Sure.
Let's start with Colorado, where Senator Michael Bennet is in a virtual tie with Tea Party-backed Republican Ken Buck. How does this one look?
It's a 1-point race right now, with Ken Buck leading by that 1 point. Obviously, that's way too close to call. Buck has been leading the entire year, and then just in the last week, the gap has narrowed. In fact, 1 or 2 polls, showing Bennett actually going ahead. But 1-point race, you can't call it.
Now, there is also a heated battle for President Obama's former seat in Illinois. Any insight into whether it will be Democrat Alexei Giannoulias or Republican Mark Kirk?
Mark Kirk has been leading. He's leading right now as we speak. More recent polls have him up 3 or 4%. He averages about a 2-point lead. You have so many undecided voters in Illinois, so it's going to depend on the turnout machine. Remember, Chicago defines turnout machines. But you're talking about a race that has 25-28% of voters who are genuinely undecided. I don't think many of them are even going to vote. Too close to call.
Nevada's Senate race is also too close to call, some say, and especially it is also considered among the more vicious races. Does Tea Party-backed Republican Sharon Angle oust Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid?
Again, as you said, too close to call. She does lead by 1. In the more recent polls in the last 2 days, her lead's 2 or 3 points, still well within the margin of error. Arguably, Harry Reid had a poor debate and is not closing out well. Sharon Angle has as good a chance as she has ever had all year to topple the Senate Majority Leader, but nobody can make a call on that one.
All right. Well, what about in Pennsylvania? Democratic Representative Joe Sestak, who beat GOP defector Arlen Specter in the primary. Does he have a chance against former Republican Representative Pat Toomey?
You know, last week he was closing the gap. Pat Toomey, you know, was leading by as much as 10 or 12 points. And then the race last week became tied. A couple of polls had Joe Sestak up by a few points. The tide seems to have turned, and we see Toomey leading by right now, as we speak, about 3 points. But there's another situation where you've got a governor, Ed Rendell, a mayor of Philadelphia, Michael Nutter, who are huge get-out-the-vote draws. And so Sestak has a fighting chance, but that's leaning Republican.
All right. What about Washington State Senator Patty Murray, a Democrat, and Republican Dino Rossi?
You know, Dino Rossi came within 24 votes of becoming governor just a few years ago. Later polls have Patty Murray leading, but not by very much, by about 3 or 4 points. Rossi seems to be fading, but again, if there is that wave that we were talking about earlier, that could spell doom for Patty Murray, but not likely. I think she keeps it.
All right. What about West Virginia? Democratic Governor Joe Manchin and Republican John Racy.
You know, fascinating, because Racy had pulled ahead last week. Manchin's back in the lead, getting a little more comfortable to a point where it's 5 or 6 points that he leads by. However, there's a story today, just today, that Manchin's administration is being investigated by the federal government for some corruption. We don't know very many details about it. That could be a tide turner. The president is not very popular in West Virginia. And in fact, the very popular governor, Joe Manchin, has been distancing himself from the president. I think the Robert Byrd seat stays Democrat, but let's watch this investigation and see if it plays.
All right, anything can happen, right?
Anything can happen.
John, one of the more intriguing gubernatorial contests is in Florida, where Republican Rick Scott faced Democrat Alex Sink in a debate in which Alex Sink violated the rules of the debate by looking at a text message from a staffer. Now, you have polled this race. How do you see it playing out?
Alex Sink leads by about 4 or 5 points in my poll. Some other polls have Rick Scott actually leading by 1 or 2. Her lead is not a strong one, however. There's a lot of undecided voters, many of whom I'm not sure will even bother to turn out to vote. I think this is another Florida election that's going to be too close to call.
Are there any other gubernatorial races or contests that you're watching closely?
Oh, yeah, California. And in California, interestingly, Jerry Brown is starting to pull substantially ahead of Meg Whitman, who has spent perhaps as much as $140 million. Looking like Jerry Brown may become the once and future governor of California.
Okay. Well, John, you recently polled on this subject. If Republicans win control of either one or both chambers, do you see Republicans compromising with Obama and Democrats, or is Obama capable of a Clinton-esque triangulation toward the center?
Okay, two different questions there. The first is about Republicans. Generally, I don't, especially when you see Senator McConnell saying that with Republican victories on November 2nd, the next step is to defeat President Obama. And so I think the inclination is to not work with the president. I also think that the Tea Party will define the Republican Party, and I don't think the Tea Party is in much of a compromising mood. On the other hand, I see elements of Barack Obama that could be Clinton-esque. And so look for the Republicans to move further to the right and further towards rejecting proposals by the president. Meanwhile, look to the president trying to gain back among moderate voters and independent voters that which he had once had in 2008, but which he's lost in the last 2 years.
John, last question real quickly. Over the weekend, the New York Times reported that Democrats are backing fake Tea Party and other third-party candidates in hopes of diverting votes that would otherwise go toward Republicans. There have also been reports of fraud committed by groups spawned by Acorn. Do you see this as potentially having an impact on the electoral result?
Boy, we're seeing them in some races in New Jersey. in particular, what you had mentioned about overtly, Democratic groups overtly funding, and Democrats funding third party or Tea Party candidates, yeah, it could. It could siphon off some votes from the Republican candidate and put the seats in play. But just to go back right to the very beginning, a lot of these seats are very, very close. Not looking good for the Democrats, but really no love for the Republicans either.
All right, John Zogby of Zogby International, thanks so much. As always, we appreciate your insight.
Thank you, Kathleen. Take care.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.